Thank you for joining us for this little conversation that we're going to have with our rapid response advocates for the Center for Violence Prevention. So I just want to take a minute and say who everybody is. We have Keisha, who's assigned to Central Mississippi, Brittany, who's in North Mississippi, Casey, who's in the Pine Belt, and then Amanda, who's also in North Mississippi, and then, of course, Christina, who manages all of this. So we want to talk a little bit today about what happens after a victim is recovered from trafficking. As many of you know, there have been a lot of ops lately. There's been a lot of news stories about how many victims were rescued or recovered from the ops that were held across the state. And so we just want to talk today to inform the general public about what happens with victims immediately after the op, and why the steps that these ladies take in moving victims forward, why they're also necessary and important. And many people would just assume that a victim would be anxious for services and that they would just run to the whole recovery aspect, but many times that's not the case. A lot of times, and I'm going to ask Casey to delve into this in just a minute, and for Amanda to maybe give us an example, but you know, this isn't the first time a victim has heard "we're here to help you," because a lot of times they've been in the system. And so Casey, talk to us a little bit about that from your perspective.
Right. Recovery doesn't usually look like what people anticipate, and for us an important part of recovery is empowering the victim to make their own decisions and to decide what they want their life to look like. And I think it's easy for people who haven't been through their traumas and haven't been trafficked to step back and say, oh, well, you should go to rehab, you should go to the shelter, you should stay there 2 years, you should get this job, you should go to school, and have a whole list of how they should live their lives. But people aren't in their same shoes. They don't have their same fears. They don't have their same, need to survive, right? Maybe they're in a place where they can thrive and the victim's just trying to survive. And so frequently what I find with victims is that their traffickers have verbally abused them, psychologically abused them, they have physically abused them, and so severely that for them just surviving that day is all that they can think about. They can't think about where they're going to be 3 months from now. They can't think about a year from now. So if you show up and say, hey, you have your whole life ahead of you, what do you want to do? That's scary. That's hard to think about. That's, it's not, the rest of us at kindergarten maybe start out 5, who do you want to be when you grow up? But they're starting out as someone who maybe didn't get to finish high school, and someone who didn't get to get work experience that they have on their resume and other opportunities. And you're trying to say, you're going to start your life over, tell me right now what you want to do. And they don't know. They haven't gotten to a safe place where they feel comfortable to decide that. It's a new environment, it's scary. So our goal is to empower the victims so that they know they're safe, they're secure, we're going to be there to help them, whether it's in shelter or giving them referrals out in the field, helping them, and that they get to make the decisions on what they want their life to look like, when they want to go to rehab, when or if they want to come into shelter, and what programs they want to pursue. And we all know everybody's more successful in programs and other things in life when it's something you actually want to do and when you're ready to do it. And so that's, I think, sometimes looking from the outside in, you want to put them on a certain timeline, and we just can't do that with victims.
And the old saying of, we know what's best for you. And like you're saying, they're used to hearing that from their traffickers and everybody else that's in their world. And so when we come at them with a whole different approach and try to empower them and just give them information, sometimes that really requires a brain switch for them, which is really difficult.
It is. It can be overwhelming.
Amanda, give us an example of a situation you've seen like this.
Well, oftentimes, victims don't see themselves as victims, first of all, and they've been told, you're responsible, you've made these choices, you've broken these laws, you've done these things. And they don't trust based on the experiences they've had with law enforcement, the experiences they've had with people who they should have been able to trust in their lives. Oftentimes they're they've been in the system before. So an example that I have, there was one young woman, she was barely an adult that had been recovered from an off, and when they brought her in to meet with me, she was absolutely terrified to be there. She was totally shut down. She didn't want to make eye contact with anyone. She kept her head down. She had tears in her eyes, and she was fearful. She was fearful of her trafficker. She was fearful of the law enforcement. She had no reason to trust any of us, and us included, myself included. And so we couldn't just jump right into, okay, these are all the things that you're going to get today, and we're going to offer you all these things. So we had to slow everything down. First of all, make her feel safe, let her understand that, we are separate from law enforcement. We're here, to help you. You're not in any trouble. We were able to just go ahead and give her something to eat and something to drink. And we took a little walk outside for a second and just kind of brought everything down. And as Casey was talking about with what she was saying, and then, what's been said in the past, we've talked about confidentiality, is we were able to empower her when she saw that, okay, these people aren't forcing me to give a statement against my trafficker. There aren't, I'm not going to jail in this moment. They're giving me food. When she saw that she had some control over the situation, that did empower her quite a bit. So from that point, we were able to, have some conversations about, okay, what are your basic needs right now? Found out she really only had the clothes on her back. So we were able to provide her some clothes. The next day we followed up with her, was able to go out and meet her later on, bring her some more clothing, hygiene items. She had medical there that night at the op, and so she found out that there were some medical conditions that she had. So she was going to need ongoing medical. So we worked to connect her to a special clinic nearby where she could get ongoing medical services. From there, I was able to share some education resources for her so she could continue on and get some education, do job training. So she and I have continued to talk and have conversations. She's got resources for therapy and counseling services. So actually right now she's working a job, and she's, kind of progressing along, and at this point in a much better place than she was the night when we first met.
Okay. Brittany, why is confidentiality so important in working with victims?
Well, one, it builds trust with the victim. It lets them know that we don't have any ulterior motives and that we have their best interest at heart. And two, it creates confidence in us as advocates.
So when you start to build a bond with victims, why is that important? That trust, why is that important to a victim opening up and trusting you?
Because they've lost a lot of their power, and so confidentiality gives them some power back in who gets their information and how that's shared with people. So we only share what they want us to share with who they want us to share it with.
And how is that different from their typical experience?
Well, all their power was taken from them, so that can be their identification, things like that. They haven't always had the choice in who knows what and what's said about them.
And in addition to that, a lot of the victims that we work with, whether they're minors or adults, if they've been involved in the system as minors, then they're accustomed to being talked about, right?
Right.
So
it protects their reputation and the misuse of their information.
okay. So many times when victims are recovered, to go back to what Amanda was talking about, they will test the waters. They may not immediately come in that night after an operation, but they may, what we call test the waters, and what that means is they may reach out a week later and say, I need a coat, I'm cold, can you help me get a coat? And then, then they may come back a month later or 2 months later and say, I'm afraid, I'm in danger. So, Christina, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, when they're picked up in an op or something like that, that is another traumatic experience, and so they're looking to survive that moment, and if depending on what they what they need to do to survive. I mean, they're still kind of operating on a basic need kind of brain, like, and so they might see a need as a coat or food or something like that, and so they're reaching out because, well, we planted the seed of, this is what we can do for you. So, and when we provide a basic need, that actually is grounding. And so it helps them, it helps their brain kind of settle in to, okay, I can now maybe plan something else. What we think about when we're at the op, we are in our full frontal lobe. We are planning, we are executing, we are considering, we are making judgment calls. We have all of our faculties with us to decide what needs to happen next. They're not in that place. They're in the place of, how do I survive this moment, this place, this next hour, this next night? And so it's not until we're able to give them what they need to even think about any kind of hormone stabilization. That's something that is a cognitive function, and it doesn't happen until the chemicals in your brain actually kind of settle in, and food, water, sleep, not being in pain, not having a threat hovering over you. And that can be a threat from a trafficker. It could also be a threat from law enforcement.
They used to go into jail. Am I going to have to go to jail tonight?
Absolutely.
I mean, is this person going to tell everything I'm telling her? Is she going to walk out the door and go tell it to all those cops I see sitting around out there? So, they're really in fear. And I think you also have to consider the fact that that's what we've been doing. That has been the norm in working with this population. Is they're brought in, and then they're the ones who bear the charges for what had happened to them, and so it's a common response because that's what they're used to. That's what they usually see in these instances.
And they're very much used to being coerced, and so cooperate. If you cooperate, then we will do so and so. And we flip that. We don't require any cooperation. When we first meet somebody, we're giving them informed consent from the start. You don't want to talk to me, you don't have to talk to me. And part of our collaboration with law enforcement is that they have a really good understanding of how it benefits their investigation, the safety, and the outcome that they want by putting that victim's needs first, and not coercing them into making a decision that for them in that moment doesn't feel safe.
Okay. So to follow up on what Christina was talking about the trauma brain and the victim response, and then the way we handle things, how we approach the victim in the immediacy of recovery. Talk to me about how the medical piece and the 24-hour response, how does that help in forming that relationship with the victim?
I think it's important that we have the medical. We have medical on scene for the ops that we do, and we also have the forensic clinic here, and our nurse practitioner follows up with them and offers them testing on site at the ops, and then follows up with them for continued medical services.